Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all so much for being here today and beginning this new journey of radical acceptance with Tara Brach and myself and all of you. As I've been kind of exploring this next journey myself, I'm realizing I think it's going to be pretty transformative and pretty powerful. Um, those of you who have been here for a while, so we have a couple new people here today. Lee and Judy are both here, which I'm really grateful for, and I hope you get a lot out of today's session and will want to join us. For the others who've been here for a while, since really like the beginning of the pandemic, and there are a couple of others who've been with us as well, and I'm not sure if they'll be joining us for this series or not, but probably at some point. And there may be a couple more joining us as well. I know some people want to, but weren't able to join us live today. This will be in many ways a culmination of a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last few years. And I mentioned last night in class, like we started off with some pretty, what I would say, just very solid foundational work through yoga and meditation and Buddhist teachings. We did some work with the yamas and the niyamas, which are like kind of like the 10 commandments of yoga. Here comes Lauren. She's coming in as well. Lauren, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we moved into some Buddhist teachings, both of Pema Chodron and Adi Shanti. And then we kind of started to turn our awareness kind of outward, and we looked at some other teachers, including Bell Hooks and her seminal work on relationships. And then we just finished up an exploration of Stoicism. And how some of the teachings of Stoicism and yoga relate, and meditation. So we've been on a pretty awesome path. And now I feel like we're going to turn all of this teaching, all of these learnings back onto ourselves and go into kind of looking at what holds us back, right? What really holds us back? We have all these teachings that we've explored, and they are amazing. And many of you have explored them with me already in terms of yoga and meditation and mindfulness and breath work and yoga nidra, and we've done journey dance. We've done all kinds of things, right? And it's really been great, and I've certainly grown a lot from it, and I hope you have too. But we can still often feel stuck, and we can still often feel triggered, insecure, like we're not good enough, like we're never going to get there in some way, And so it's not that these practices haven't been helpful and aren't helpful. They are helpful, and I'm super grateful for them. I don't know how I would have gotten through, never mind my life, but just like the pandemic and the last few years, without these practices and insights to help guide me through and give me this refuge and this place to explore and to just be okay. I think I've told many of you before that when people ask me what I teach, I often will answer, I'll say, well, I teach okayness, right? And people kind of look at me like, what is that? And it doesn't sound very interesting. and I look at them and I say, oh no, it's a superpower, right? If we can be okay in any situation, right, then we're free. We're a liberated being, right? And but the truth is that there still comes a lot of times where I'm not feeling okay, and I imagine that happens to you too. I imagine there are plenty of times where you're just like, okay, I am pretty uncomfortable right now, and I really either don't want to be here or I want to get out of this in some way, shape, or form, right? So we're not in that moment okay with what is, right? So we're not free, right? We're struggling in some way. We're suffering in some way. And I say this with the utmost compassion, because this is just the human condition, and we're going to really explore this more deeply, and that's what this whole idea of radical acceptance is about, is to really kind of dive in and see why this is and what we can do about it to just continue to free ourselves of that dynamic. Because a lot of the times we'll look back at a situation, maybe a difficult conversation that we had with someone, and we'll realize, wow, the feelings I had about that were really hyperbolized, really exaggerated feelings, when actually I was just sitting there. Someone's just saying something and I don't like it, and yet I feel like I'm gonna die in that moment, and it's like I'm not gonna die, right? So what is going on here? What is happening, and how can I start to free myself of that response? Because, as you probably have had, and I have too, when we feel that way, when we feel triggered, we often do and say things that we're like, oh, that wasn't the best response. That didn't help the situation, right? That probably made it worse, right? And I can put my hand up for that. And I'd be surprised if you couldn't put your hand up for that as well too. That when we're feeling that almost sense of kind of panic, right, that we don't respond well, right? And then we do something that we're like, oh, well, gee, I wish I didn't do that. And that's okay. We have to have compassion for that too, right? Because these things happen. But we obviously know that, yeah, I'd like to not respond like that. I'd like to respond differently, right? And that's where these practices can come in and be just super helpful, And, I was talking to somebody recently about this phenomena, about getting triggered and then reacting in ways which were like, yeah, that wasn't so great. And I said, yeah, the basic rule of thumb, I think, is when we're feeling triggered by someone or something, is to do nothing, to say, particularly say nothing, right? And because it's just almost anything we say in that situation, we could do something better. We could say or do something better, and we don't realize that until later, right? Like, oh, I wish I had responded this way, or I could have said this instead, and that probably would have made the transition easier, right? Again, this has happened to me recently, so I realized, like, wow, yeah, I should just not say anything, and even if I get pushed, like, say, well, what about you? What do you think? You can say something like, well, I'm going to have to consider it, and that might not placate the person, but you're creating a boundary for yourself. You're creating a safe space. It's like, okay, now is not the time for me to respond, because it's not going to be great, And these are things that just mindfulness and the practices that we're going to do over the next several weeks will help us to realize. It's like when we feel a stimulus, which is the trigger, how do we want to respond? And we tend to respond in very ways that we learned when we were children, that we learned from our parents, that we learned somewhat from society. We get very self-righteous, we get very judgmental. These are all self-defense mechanisms that we have implored, and that people have actually, other people taught us to do these things too. So we've learned these ways of creating drama and exacerbating situations that we know deep down don't serve us particularly well, but we don't have other tools available. So it's kind of like, oh, that's my go-to, is to say this, or to get defensive, or to be judgmental, or whatever it is. It's just we're trying to push away the difficult feelings, right? And so we'll do whatever we can, rather than kind of just letting them wave over us and not responding. And so this practices and this exploration is going to be all kind of about how do we accept ourselves primarily, and then accept reality. And accepting reality and accepting ourselves doesn't mean we can't have desires to improve things, right? That we can't have desires to take up a new language, or to work on a relationship, or to try to create something in our work. It's not complacency. Acceptance and complacency are two different things. Acceptance is just, this is who I am and this is enough, right? And this is the situation, this is enough. Even if it's an unpleasant situation, it doesn't have to be different, right? In order for me to be okay, right? And this is a huge, again, superpower when we can get to this place. Because then we can make choices that are just way more graceful, way more in alignment with our true self. And so we're not just kind of buffeting and kind of running around trying to avoid these unpleasant or difficult situations, right? We're just kind of moving through with some grace and equanimity. This is the intention of all of our practice. But what I think is particular and special about what we're doing here now is that we're going to kind of dive right in to it. And I don't know how many people have been able to start reading the book, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But she dives right in at the very beginning. I mean, I found myself just getting triggered right out of the gate, first chapter. And because I just realized, oh yeah, there's lots of places that I get stuck. And, and I've been doing this for a long time. And so I realize if I'm getting stuck, other people are getting stuck too. And so it's very humbling right out of the gate here with this endeavor. So that being said, we have to really practice compassion, and we really have to sort of say, you know what, I'm okay, I'm worthy, I'm whole, and yes, I have stuff, right? And again, everybody has stuff, everybody, okay? I haven't met the Buddha yet. I've met some pretty enlightened people, and pretty people that are pretty along the way and have done a lot of work, and but I have yet to meet a person who doesn't have their stuff, okay? Doesn't still have judgments, triggers, things that make them uncomfortable. Yeah. So that's okay. And so we're all on this spectrum, and we're all doing the best we can. And I think we're all here because we know that we want to have better relationships. We want to be more free of our suffering. We want to transcend whatever wounds that we've carried with us from childhood and other relationships and other experiences. So since we want to do that, we need to find some tools and methods and support for doing that. And that's really what this is. This is a dive into ourselves in a compassionate way that will hopefully give us some practices and tools that will allow us to move more gracefully through the vicissitudes of life, which are guaranteed to come. Right? There is no way we're going to avoid that. So that's just, we know that kind of intrinsically, like life is going to keep throwing our stuff at us, no matter how lovely and good it gets. It's still going to throw stuff at us, right? People are still going to get sick. They're still going to die. There's still going to be accidents that happen. There's still going to be things misspoken, no matter how free we get, right? So this is training for us to be able to kind of go through those waves, right? The waves that are going to happen with just a little more ease and a little more clarity and a little more grace, right? And if we can do that, our lives and other people's lives that we touch will be better. So that's our intention of all this. And again, I want to thank you for beginning this journey, and we'll get as far along as we can today. And I'm going to try in many ways to keep it pretty close to the hour-long time, because as our group expands, it's kind of important that we don't necessarily expand the time, but we can always just take as much time as we need over time. So this could take, I'm guessing, 3 to 4 months, honestly, to get through this. So that's, so again, there's no hurry. And getting enlightened is a multi-lifetime journey. But when you find something particularly good, which I think we have stumbled upon something particularly good, it's totally okay to take your time with it. I mean, we took a whole year to explore the Yoga Sutras, and that didn't feel like we were dragging it out, at least not to me, because there's just a lot there, right? I think there's going to be quite a lot here as well. And so we're going to take our time, We're not going to rush it. If it feels like it's dragging, please let me know, and I'll try to adjust to that. But just even in the first 20 pages of this book, I'm like, okay, we got a lot going on here, and so I'm not going to try to rush it too much. And but again, this is our group, so I am open to feedback. I'm open to what's working, what's not working, what you want more of, what you want less of. So it's not to say don't give me feedback. Please do, and we'll adjust accordingly. I'm going to suggest a few ground rules for it, because again, I want to try to be as welcoming as we can to this process. And so in doing so, we'll need a few ground rules to make it work. As usual, when I do sort of workshop group or retreat stuff, I always talk about sort of confidentiality and just what might get shared here, whether I share it, because I tend to share quite a bit of stuff about what's going on, or you share it, that we try to keep it in this container, right? And we don't sort of talk about it out of school, unless you're talking to somebody individually about something and they want to talk about it out of here, then obviously you can have those one-on-one conversations or small group conversations, however you guys get together. But just respecting that things are probably going to come up in this journey that are going to be pretty sensitive, and so just being mindful and considerate of that. I'm going to suggest you get the book. You don't have to have the book in order to go on this journey, right? Because I'm going to be reading some parts of the book and then doing meditations and talking about it. It's not required to read the book or have the book. I'm going to suggest you do, because I think it's going to be helpful. And so I would do it this way. I'd read the book and read it whatever pace you want. You don't have to read along with me. You could read the whole book at once. I would do whatever sort of note-taking or underlining you like. And then I would keep a journal of some sort where you could do mostly two things. One is write down when things are popping up for you, like what you're feeling about something. Maybe write the page number down and like, okay, yeah, this is triggering something for me. Just make a note of that. And then big thing is questions. The most helpful thing to our group dynamic is probably going to be your questions. So if some questions come up along the way, I would write them down as well. And then as we get to that section, you just kind of have your notes available, right? So that you can sort of see what that section was bringing up for you and see what questions that you had when we get there. And things will obviously evolve, but I think that will be pretty helpful. And a couple things, when I'm actually reading from the book, I wouldn't necessarily try to follow along. That's going to get distracting for you, because we're going to do a meditation first. You're going to be in a pretty open space. You don't want to necessarily be in the kind of academic mode of trying to figure things out, right? That is a limiting mindset that is probably not going to be helpful in our sessions together. So when I'm reading, I would just suggest listening. You know where the section is, right? So you can have your notes available, right? But just sort of listen to what I'm going to be trying to pick. I'm going to be picking and choosing things, because we're not going to read the whole book here. There's just no way we're going to spend our time doing all that. But I am going to pick and choose things, and I might even bounce around. So you're trying to follow me in reading is, I don't think, going to be the best use of your time. I think just listening and feeling and noticing, and then maybe making little notes about what it's bringing up for you, or again, questions, that's going to probably be the most helpful, right? Read the book at some other time, right? Not necessarily when I'm reading it here. I think we'll get more out of it that way. And the last part of it is, while we have a group, and there's going to be there's a bit of a group therapy dynamic going on here, because things are going to come up. We're going to try to keep it fairly contained. So when we're sharing observations, what's coming up, and then questions. And I'm going to try to manage the conversation so that it doesn't string on too long with stories, right? Stringing on, so personal stories about stuff like that, certainly you're welcome to talk about anything you want here, right? But we're also going to try to keep it contained. So I may redirect the conversation at some point, or ask somebody else, to comment, because I want to give everybody a chance to feel like they're contributing or getting their questions out there. And so there might be some limiting of sharing that I will orchestrate in some way. That being said, I'm open to talking to people offline outside of our sessions together, and helping you work through something in whichever way, whether it just be, a quick conversation or, all of I do one-on-one sessions as well. So there's other ways of making yourself heard, and we'll be able to explore those. So feel free again to reach out if you want to follow up on something, right, in more detail. Okay, I think that's pretty much the ground rules for the whole thing. Not too bad, pretty straightforward. The way this usually happens is I do a little introduction at the beginning, then we do a meditation for about 15 minutes. Okay, so 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes a little longer, but usually 10 to 15 minutes. Then I do a little bit of reading, and then we open it up at the end for questions and comments and what's kind of coming up from this beginning. I'm going to start off today with a reading from the very end of the first chapter, because I think it does a really great job of synopsizing why we're doing this work. And then I'll lead into the meditation. I'll go right into the meditation. Then I'll go back and read a little bit more, because we're already almost halfway through our time together today. And then we'll open it up to what's coming up. The last thing I'll make about this is that, again, I will be shocked if this doesn't start triggering stuff right away. Because it did for me, and so don't let that intimidate you. Okay, it's natural. As I like to say, there's a reason why most people, like 99% of people in the world, do not do deeper spiritual practice, and it's because it's a little scary and it brings up our stuff, and so they just avoid it, right? But I think we all know that avoiding it doesn't work very well. Okay, avoiding it just perpetuates the suffering, right? So here we have a very amenable, wonderful group of people. I know all of you to some extent, Lee. I'm just meeting you, but I just know that the fact that you're here means that you're open to this idea and this work, and that's a real gift. That's a true gift. And these practices that we've been doing now for almost 3 years have been a great gift to me, and I'm pretty sure they've been a great gift to everybody who's joined us, because it gives us a place of refuge in which to say, oh, okay, let me just relax here and just allow myself to receive and process. This is a safe space in which we're not judged. There's nothing wrong with us, right? We're just going on this journey, and we're going on this journey together. And so you don't have to do anything. If you don't say anything during the whole time we're online here, that's totally fine. And so there's no obligation. You're just allowing the experience to happen, right? And the more you show up, and the more you just kind of do some of your own work, whatever that is, however you do it, the more you're going to get out of it. And I know that you'll get a lot out of it. So I just want to, again, thank you for your showing up today and being here and being kind of courageous to say, okay, let me see what this is all about. And I hope you like it. Okay, I'm going to start with just reading that section that I mentioned at the end of chapter 1. Many people have told me that when they finally are able to see how long their life has been imprisoned by self-hatred and shame, they feel not only grief, but also a sense of life-giving hope. Like waking up from a bad dream, when we can see our prison, we also see our potential. The renowned 7th century Zen master Seng Tan taught that true freedom is being without anxiety, about imperfection. This means accepting our human existence and all of life as it is. Imperfection is not our personal problem. It is a natural part of existing. We all get caught in wants and fears. We all act unconsciously. We all get disease and deteriorate. When we relax about imperfection, we no longer lose our life moments in the pursuit of being different and in the fear of what is wrong. D.H. Lawrence described our Western culture as being like a great uprooted tree with its roots in the air. We are perishing for lack of fulfillment of our greater needs, he wrote. We are cut off from the great sources of our inward nourishment and renewal. We come alive as we rediscover the truth of our goodness and our natural connectedness to all of life. Our greater needs are met in relating lovingly with each other, relating with full presence to each moment, relating to the beauty and pain that is within and around us. As Lawrence said, we must plant ourselves again in the universe. Although the trance of feeling separate and unworthy is an inherent part of our conditioning as humans, so too is our capacity to awaken. We free ourselves from the prison of trance as we stop the war against ourselves, and instead learn to relate to our lives with a wise and compassionate heart. This book is about the process of embracing our lives. When we learn to cultivate radical acceptance, we begin to rediscover the garden, a forgotten but cherished sense of wholeness, wakefulness, and love. Just coming into an easy seated pose for a moment. Closing the eyes. And begin to breathe deeply through your nose into your belly. Letting the belly rise away from the spine on the inhale breath. And letting the belly fall back down towards the spine on the exhale. Inhale, chest and belly rises. Exhale, chest and belly falls. Soften the shoulders. Soften the face. Lengthen the spine. Inhale, chest rises, belly rises, open. Exhale, chest falls. Belly falls. Soften the shoulders. Soften the face. Lengthening the spine, chin back, shoulders back, heart open. Inhaling, chest rising, belly rising, feeling the front side open and expand. Exhale, chest falls. Belly falls. Soften the shoulders. Soften the face. Inhale. Hold the breath. Elongate and pull up through the crown. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Feel yourself going inward towards the navel center. Inhale. Hold the breath in. Feel the heart expanding, throat, third eye, crown. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Feel yourself going inward towards the navel. Inhale. Hold. Engage. Pull in and up. Exhale. Hold it out. Tuck the chin. Go inward towards the navel. Inhale. Hold. Engage root lock, chin lock. Pull in and up towards the crown. Exhale. Hold. Tuck the chin. Pull inward. One more. Inhale. Hold. Engage. Pull. Exhale. Begin to soften. Allow. Release. And feel yourself just settling in. Settling in. Shoulders relax. Face relax. Thighs relax. And creating an atmosphere of friendliness with ourselves. Befriending our chest, our belly, our thighs, our shoulders. Just a softening, soothing, befriending sensation. Maybe creating a little smile, just a little upturn of the mouth. Feeling that sense of friendliness again, like you were seeing a good friend that you hadn't seen in a while. And just being that friend. Creating a sense of I'm glad to be here. A little smile, upturn of the eyes, of the mouth, a softening of the forehead, an opening of the heart. Shoulders and body relaxing, softening, and softening some more. A sense of friendliness surrounding us, allowing everything. The sensations, the thoughts, the emotions. A sense of gentleness. Acceptance. A gentle, allowing presence. Just expanding through the whole body, the torso, the legs, the knees, the ankles, the feet, the shoulders, the chest, the back, sense of gentleness, softness, the back of the neck, the arms, the hands, the fingers. Noticing moment to moment the sensations of the body, the face, the back of the head, the left side of the head, the right side of the head, the forehead, the crown, the back of the head, noticing the breath, the gentle rising and falling of the breath. The sensations of the breath that moves by the nostrils and the back of the throat. Gentleness, softness, kindness, friendliness. And bring these sensations right to the heart center, the feelings in the heart. Friendliness, kindness, peacefulness, embodying peace, or metta, as the Buddhists call it. May I be peaceful. May I be calm. May I be happy. May I accept whatever is arising. Sensations, thoughts, emotions, sensations, thoughts, emotions. Everything is okay. Not pushing away. Not holding on. Peace in this moment, without judgment. Peace in this moment, without judgment. May I be peaceful. May I be calm. May I be happy. Soften. Allow. Release. Just resting in this space for a little bit longer. Taking a deep inhale breath. Hold, suspend. Exhale, release. Neither opening your eyes or keeping your eyes closed. Just let these words kind of flow over you. See what they bring up. When I was in college, I went off to the mountains for a weekend of hiking with an older, wiser friend. After we set up our tent, we sat by a stream watching the water swirl around the rocks and talking about our lives. At one point, she described how she was learning to be her own best friend. A huge wave of sadness came over me, and I broke down, sobbing. I was the furthest thing from my own best friend. I was continually harassed by an inner judge who was merciless, relentless, nitpicking, driving, often invisible but always on the job. I knew I would never treat a friend the way I treated myself, without mercy or kindness. My guiding assumption was, something is fundamentally wrong with me, and I struggled to control and fix what felt like a basically flawed self. I drove myself in academics, was a fervent political activist, devoted myself to a very full social life. I avoided pain, created more, with an addiction to food and a preoccupation with achievement. My pursuit of pleasure was sometimes wholesome in nature with friends, but it also included impulsive kind of thrill-seeking through recreational drugs, sex, and other adventures. In the eyes of the world, I was highly functional. Internally, I was anxious, driven, and often depressed. I didn't feel at peace with myself, with any part of my life. Feeling not okay went hand in hand with deep loneliness. I sometimes imagined that I was living inside a transparent orb that separated me from the people and life around me. When I felt good about myself and at ease with others, the bubble thinned until it was like an invisible wisp of gas. When I felt bad about myself, the walls got so thick it seemed others must be able to see them. Imprisoned within, I felt hollow and achingly alone. The fantasy faded, sometimes as I got older, but I lived with the fear of letting someone down or being rejected myself. With this college friend, I felt different. I trusted her enough to be completely open. Over the next 2 days of hiking on high mountain ridges, sometimes talking with her, sometimes sitting in silence, I began to realize that beneath all my mood swings, depression, loneliness, and addictive behavior, lurked the feeling of deep personal deficiency. I was getting my first clear glimpse into a core of suffering that I would revisit again and again in my life. While I felt fully exposed and raw, I intuitively knew that by facing this pain, I was entering a path of healing. As we drove down from the mountains that Sunday night, my heart was lighter but still aching. I longed to be kinder to myself. I longed to befriend my inner experience and feel more intimacy and ease with the people in my life. When some years later these longings drew me to the Buddhist path, I found there the teachings and practices that enabled me to directly face my feelings of unworthiness and insecurity. They gave me a way of seeing clearly what I was experiencing and showed me how to relate to my life with compassion. The teachings of the Buddha also helped me undo my painful and mistaken notion that I was alone in my suffering, that it was a personal problem and somehow my fault. For many of us, feelings of deficiency are right around the corner. It doesn't take much. just hearing of someone else's accomplishments, being criticized, getting into an argument, making a mistake at work, to make us feel that we are not okay. As a friend of mine put it, feeling that something is wrong with me is the invisible and toxic gas I am always breathing. When we experience our lives through this lens of personal insufficiency, we are imprisoned in what I call the trance of unworthiness. Trapped in this trance, we are unable to perceive the truth of who we really are. We don't have to wait until we're on our deathbed to realize what a waste of precious life it is to carry the belief that something is wrong with us. Yet because our habits of feeling insufficient are so strong, awakening from the trance involves not only inner resolve, but also active training in the heart and mind. Through Buddhist awareness practices, we free ourselves from the suffering of trance by learning to recognize what is true in the present moment and by embracing whatever we see with an open heart. This cultivation of mindfulness and compassion is what I call radical acceptance. I'm going to skip ahead here. We are living in a waking dream that completely defines and delimits our experience of life. The rest of the world is merely a backdrop as we struggle to get somewhere, to be a better person, to accomplish, to avoid making mistakes. As in a dream, we take our stories to be the truth, compelling reality, and they consume most of our attention. While we eat lunch to drive home from work, while we talk to our partners or read to our children at night, we continue to replay our worries and plans. Inherent in this trance is the belief that no matter how hard we try, we are always in some way falling short. Feeling unworthy goes hand in hand with feeling separate from others, separate from life. If we are defective, how can we possibly belong? It is a vicious cycle. The more deficient we feel, the more separate and vulnerable we feel. Underneath our fear of being flawed is a more primal fear that something is wrong with life, that something bad is going to happen. Our reaction to this fear is to feel blame, even hatred toward whatever we consider the source of the problem, ourselves, others, life itself. But even when we have directed our aversion outward, deep down we still feel vulnerable. Our feelings of unworthiness and alienation from others give rise to various forms of suffering. For some, the glaring expression is addiction. It may be to alcohol, food, or drugs. Others addicted to a relationship, dependent on a particular person or people in order to feel they are complete and that life is worth living. Some try to feel important through long hours of grueling work, an addiction that our culture often applauds. Some create other enemies that are always at war with the world. The belief that we are deficient and unworthy makes it difficult to trust that we are truly loved. Many of us live in an undercurrent of depression or hopelessness about ever feeling close to other people. We feel that if they realize we are boring or stupid, selfish or insecure, they'll reject us. If we're not attracted enough, we may never be loved in an intimate, romantic way. We yearn for an unquestioned experience of belonging, to feel at home with ourselves and others, at ease and fully accepted. But the trance of unworthiness keeps the sweetness of belonging out of reach. If we had only done better, if were somehow different, things would have gone right. While we might place the blame on someone else, we still tacitly blame ourselves for getting into a situation in the first place. Even if we ourselves are not suffering in pain, if someone close to us, a partner or child is, we can take this as further proof of inadequacy. Let's skip ahead here a little bit. Even in the midst of community, I often feel lonely and alone. I had the idea that if I really applied myself, it would take 8 to 10 years to release all of my self-absorption and be wise and free. Periodically, I would consult teachers I admired from various other spiritual traditions. So, how am I doing? What else can I do? Invariably, they would respond, just relax. I wasn't exactly sure what they meant, but I certainly didn't think it could be just relax. How could that mean that? How could they mean that? I wasn't there yet. Chogyam Trungpa, a contemporary Tibetan Buddhist teacher, writes, the problem is that the ego can convert anything to its own use, even spirituality. What I brought to my spiritual path included all my needs to be admired, all my insecurities about not being good enough, all my tendencies to judge my inner and outer world. The playing field was larger than my earlier pursuits, but the game was still the same, striving to be different and a better person. In retrospect, it is no surprise that my self-doubts were transferred intact into my spiritual life. Those who feel plagued by not being good enough are often drawn to idealistic worldviews that offer the possibility of purifying and transcending a flawed nature. This quest for perfection is based in the assumption that we must change ourselves to belong. We may listen longingly to the message that the wholeness and goodness have always been our essence, yet still feel like outsiders, uninvited guests at the feast of life. While all human beings feel ashamed of weakness and afraid of rejection, our Western culture is a breeding ground for the kind of shame and self-hatred the Dalai Lama couldn't comprehend. Because so many of us grew up without a cohesive and nourishing sense of family, neighborhood, community, or tribe, it is not surprising that we feel like outsiders on our own and disconnected. We learn early in life that any affiliation with family and friends at school or in the workplace requires proving we are worthy. We are under pressure to compete with each other, to get ahead, to stand out as intelligent, attractive, capable, powerful, wealthy. Someone is always keeping score. Mother Teresa's surprising insight: the biggest disease today is not leprosy or tuberculosis, but rather the feeling of not belonging. We long to belong and feel as if we don't deserve it. The message of original sin is unequivocal. Because of our basically flawed nature, we do not deserve to be happy, loved by others, at ease with life. We are outcasts, and if we are to re-enter the garden, we must redeem our sinful self. We must overcome our flaws by controlling our bodies, controlling our emotions, controlling our natural surroundings, controlling other people, and we must strive tirelessly, working, acquiring, consuming, achieving, emailing, overcommitting, and rushing in, a never-ending quest to prove ourselves once and for all. That's awesome. I'm going to stop right there before we all get super depressed. This is what I meant at the very beginning when I started off. Like, she's going to dive right in, and it's not all going to be like this. It's going to get like a lot more like, okay, how do we fix this? But I've warned you. I gave you a little admonition at the very beginning. Like, this is probably not going to be comfortable right out of the gate. And so, we don't have too much time. We'll take about another, 5, 6, 7 minutes here. And I'd like to just hear from you, anyone, doesn't have to be all of us, just, again, what's this bringing up, what your questions are. If you have a short insight or something you'd like to share, please feel free to do so. So just anybody can kind of unmute themselves if you want to, and just start in. Does anybody want to add anything into this?
I thought it was kind of brilliantly insightful that she noted that the human ego could kidnap any good intention and make it its own.
Yeah.
That really, I think, speaks to a human flaw that's universal to so much of our thinking.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think anything we do, I'll just tell this quick a story analogy because it's kind of a good one to this. I used to do a lot of Bikram yoga. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, hot yoga, and it was great. I did it for a long time, and at one point I'm sitting there near the front of the class, and we're doing this rather challenging pose called standing head to knee, where you're standing on one leg, you've got your other leg out in front of you, and you're trying to get your forehead onto your knee, and it's challenging. It's balancing, it's stretching, all kind of things going on. And I remember looking across and seeing my fellow yogis. They were all out there straining, they like, trying to get there. And I just started laughing. And I was like, I had this epiphany, which I realized no one ever got an enlightened getting their head to their knee, ever. Like in the history of humankind, no one getting their head to their knee, all of a sudden their suffering's gone. And as a matter of fact, it's the way they were doing it. I mean, again, you can get enlightened while bringing your head towards your knee. That can actually be an enlightening experience. However, if you're trying so hard to get there, you're just caught up in another achievement paradigm, right? And the same thing can happen with being a yoga teacher. I mean, I'm a yoga teacher. As I've described it before, it's another jacket. It's another identity. Let me be good at this. Let me be seen as a good yoga teacher, and let me be admired as a good yoga. It's like, oh my God, I'm stuck again, So, you can totally get overly identified with any of these things, which now it's not going to relieve your suffering totally. I mean, you can be a great yogi or even a great meditator, and not be getting
Very best.
Yeah, because you're
The very
identifying. It's like exactly. I am the best. I can meditate
The
for
very
2
best.
hours. It's like, and you're still a jerk, and so you know what I mean. It's like it's not gonna. There's an intention that is so important behind what we're doing, and if that intention is just still to prove ourselves worthy in some way or to be identified with that activity, then we're still stuck. And so thank you for bringing that up, Lee. That was awesome. Anyone else have an insight or something they want to share from just the beginning of our journey here? Denise is
Really quickly, I love the Mother Teresa quote she brought along with the biggest disease today is the feeling of not belonging. That's huge, huge. And never thought of that, but I see it. It's amazing.
I think, if anybody who has kids, right? I know you have kids, Denise.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge, huge problem right now in society, gigantic. And I mean, it's all of us have that experience from time to time, but I think social media hasn't helped. Let's put it that way. And so this notion of where do I belong? How do I belong? How do I connect authentically with other people? I mean, it's a real problem. And thank you for mentioning that, Denise. Yeah.
Yeah, that made me think of I always loved this thing that Brene Brown said. I remember years ago I was feeling very much like I didn't belong, and she says it goes something like, I belong nowhere, I belong everywhere, and I belong nowhere. Yeah. So I belong everywhere, and sort of I don't belong to anywhere, anyone, or anything.
Yeah.
I've embraced that since I read that.
That is awesome. I think she was quoting from Maya Angelou when she said that.
Well, that makes sense.
I think there's a Maya Angelou. I'll try to find that because it's an awesome.
That makes sense.
Phrase, that I think Maya Angelou penned and Brene Brown has used several times. So, it's amazing. It's amazing. But that's a very advanced place to be. I belong everywhere and I belong nowhere. I mean, it's again, can you walk into your family reunion, which I just did, with a sense of I belong everywhere and I belong nowhere? It's like, that's a pretty advanced, enlightened place to be walking, when we're really getting kind of buffeted by all those, deep intrinsic egoic needs, So
definitely a practice. Yeah,
it's definitely a practice, and that's, again, the sort of path that we're going on right now is how can I feel this sense of belonging no matter where I am, but not this sense of like, I have to be here kind of thing. It's like, am I being liked? Am I being appreciated? All this sort of stuff that actually, especially with like people who, like I think when Ram Dass said, he said this great line. He said, if you want to see how enlightened you are, go spend time with your family. And I just did. I just spent like 8 days with my family, and it went pretty well, but there were some trips along the way. There were a few speed bumps. And so, yeah, it's interesting. All that stuff is right there. Anyone else want to make a kind of last comment or so before we wrap this up today?
Hi, guys.
Alexa,
So-
there you are.
Hi. So my thing that I also felt was valuable, everything you guys were just discussing, but the whole passage about befriending yourself and being your own best friend. And, I've been observant of that. I feel like my whole life that kind of was intrinsically natural to me. And I generally had a joyous life on a whole, even through hardships. But I feel like post-COVID or the evolution post-COVID, or during the massive grief, universally of COVID, somehow, COVID, the whole experience like pulled us apart in different places, apart from ourselves, and sometimes we'd get closer or more in tune. But over the past year, I have reflected on that struggle. I think I'm back there again, but there was a period within the last year and a half where I was no longer my best friend. And exactly the description she gave, where you felt like the walls widen instead of the thin gas of connection. And luckily I feel like I'm back, but I just feel like that was a really, there were some great things you read today regarding that, being your own best friend and befriending yourself.
Thank
And
you.
that nature of being your own best friend, I think when you do have that or experience that, relating to what you guys just discussed, you can go anywhere in the world and feel comfortable, connected or not connected, because you've actually got your best friend within yourself with you.
Right.
Just like in a physical sense, if you were approaching, say, the hypothetical party with a best friend in tow, you're going to be a lot more happy and confident walking into that situation, even though in this case, it's an internal thing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's just, anyway,
Really,
I liked all of that.
And I think that's a lot of, again, what the work we're doing here is about, embracing that best friend or embracing that inner child,
Yeah.
in terms of just being, how do we be okay? I go back to that notion of radical acceptance, this deep okayness. These are all kind of, we're saying sort of similar things. And so what are the practices that we need when we start to feel shaky, or when those walls start to get thick, and okay, what are the things that we can employ to help us, work through those things and thin out those walls. And the other thing, I appreciate what you said about the COVID realm, is that it's not a linear path. Okay, it's not like, hey, I'm getting enlightened now and I'm just going to keep getting enlightened and free. And that's not how life goes. And so, it goes on these waves, and we start to feel freer and more expansive and more connected and more alive, and able to be more vulnerable. And then some series of life happens, and it shuts down a little bit. So, but each time, hopefully, we get a little bit better at riding through those waves. They last a little bit less time. They maybe not as detrimental, and we're able to rise back up and open back up. So that's exactly what we're doing here, is just giving ourselves more space, more room, and more tools to help us through those vicissitudes, which, as I said at the beginning, are definitely going to happen. That's the way life is. So. Thank you for mentioning that
Yeah,
friend.
I'm just going to say one more quick thing. I'm sorry. So I felt the thing where they said the sense of self-deficiency. I think experiencing that for the first time was what was causing me to not be my best friend internally.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was a really great thing you wrote about that. I mean, we're repeating,
Yeah,
we're
that's
expressing.
those are all important observations.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up in just a moment here, and I will follow up with in terms of just making sure that people know how to get on to this to these programs, how to also get access to the recordings I mean, once you have access to the recordings, you actually have access to all the stuff that I've recorded over like 2.5 years. So, which is, there's a lot of stuff in there that you can explore. So I will follow up with anybody who needs that or who is having any issues with that. And then we'll just make it work. You know, hopefully you can get through and work through the site. Okay, but if you can't, I can send out the links and we'll make it work in some way, shape, or form. I'm really glad that you're all here. I really appreciate you all being here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I will answer them the best I can. Let's bring our hands together to heart center. Take a deep inhale. Exhale with a sigh. Inhale. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May there be peace, peace, peace. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, everyone. Namaste.
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 Namaste. Thank you